Hello and welcome to Nexus Extra. This week we've been looking at RFK Jr. as he attempts to usurp Joe Biden and win the Democratic nomination to run for president next year. Let's bring in our guest now. And John Gilmore is a major donor to his presidential campaign. Aaron Good is a podcaster who interviewed RFK just last month. And Sofia Karstens worked on his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, and is currently helping his campaign. Welcome to the program, all three of you. If I may start with you then, Sofia. As I say, we're introducing RFK Jr. to a global audience for the first time in some cases. Can you tell me what kind of a man is he? Why are you helping him?
You know, I think in this country right now, we have a Grand Canyon of constituents who feel like they don't want to wear the full uniform of crazy on either side. Our party system has become increasingly divided, and there is this middle ground constituency that I truly believe is the minority. Is the majority, and is not the minority, even though they're painted to be this kind of, oh, there's a few people here in the middle. No, I think that's the majority. And these people feel that their party and their politicians have abandoned them. And I think Robert Kennedy comes at a time when he is representing this majority. And I think he's also representing hope that, you know, we don't have to keep going down this path of further and further divide. We can actually celebrate our values about which we can agree, and our country in terms of what is positive and how we can move forward in a positive way, instead of doubling down on the moneyed interests and the corporatocracy and the military-industrial complex issues that serve only to continue to divide us. So that is why I support Bobby Kennedy, because I feel strongly that that is the hope that we need in this country if we are to survive as a democracy, as a republic.
Do you have any hope that he'll actually win the nomination?
I do have hope.
We're told by the mainstream media he doesn't have a chance, and yet the polls show him, actually quite favored by a lot of Americans.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make about the media. The media, as Bloomberg said, is the fourth branch of government, and that is correct. The mainstream media is painting him one particular way, or not painting him at all. In some cases, they're not covering him, as you just mentioned. His polling is, and his numbers are, whether that's regular polling or favorable, unfavorables, his numbers show that, in all honesty, he's already won. But the mainstream media will continue to play tricks to either sideline and dismiss him, or to reframe narratives so that people don't think they are seeing what they're seeing, and to reframe even his own words and his own messaging. And that's been an uphill climb, I think, historically, for anyone who is against the establishment, which Bobby definitely is throwing a wrench into the establishment.
Aaron Good, could you pick up on that point? I mean, 30 years ago, the New York Magazine was saying he was the Kennedy that matters, and now they're saying that he's spewing all sorts of conspiracy theories and is a danger to the country. Why is that?
Well, he's a danger to the establishment that has been misruling us for many decades. As the previous commenter noted, there's this corporatocracy in the United States, and it was this group of the top financial corporate elites that decided during World War II that the U.S. should become a global empire. And these forces created things like the CIA, and they set about essentially trying to manage all of the global capitalist world. And they really damaged what there was of American democracy and democratic institutions and the rule of law, because you can't really run an empire in a lawful way. So they began doing a lot of things covertly, and all of the victories that this corporatocracy wins over those are defeats for the public interest and for the global welfare, really. But it's enriched a class of billionaires that dominates both parties. And Robert F. Kennedy does not exactly have my politics. I'm to the left of Robert F. Kennedy, but his campaign is focused on winding down the American empire and restoring some sort of accountability and regulation of corporate America, and thereby breaking the stranglehold that this kind of imperial-minded oligarchy has over politics and society. And it has to be done now, I believe, either if not now, very, very soon, because it's going to happen regardless. The U.S. has to make a transition from being this lawless global empire to being a lawful member of the international community that uses its wealth and power and technology to improve its own lives and those of the rest of the people in the world as much as it can.
So people around the world will be saying, if he's a Democrat and he's a Kennedy, how comes he doesn't appreciate the support, or get the support, rather, of the sort of mainstream media and other Democratic politicians? Why is he an outcast?
Well, the Kennedy family has, unfortunately, the establishment essentially murdered the two paragons of the Kennedy family, Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy. And the rest of the family could have fought that, and they would have been insulted and smeared the same way that Bobby Kennedy is now. And so I think that it was easier to just go along with the establishment and be in its good graces rather than fight something that you couldn't really likely win. So I feel that they are more or less people who want more to be in the establishment, I think. And they, I think that the harsh truths that Bobby is presenting on many issues that are the reasons why the establishment is attacking him, perhaps his own family members are not really able to confront those things.
Has it got anything to do with...
It takes some courage.
One of the most perpetual criticisms we hear in the mainstream media is that RFK Jr. is anti-vaccination, and therefore he is dangerous, not just to Americans, but to people around the world. We just heard from Dr. Paul Offit, who said that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is responsible for the deaths of children in Samoa. So the question really is he anti-vaccination?
So my understanding of his position is he's not looking to outlaw vaccines or anything else. He's saying that there are many conflicts of interest in the regulatory bodies that manage the vaccine regime in the United States, and that they have not been adequately safety tested. And as a result, we don't really know if vaccination programs are impacting a number of public health problems, like the large increase in childhood diseases and chronic diseases, things like peanut allergies and so on, autoimmune disorders. He's not making that the center of his campaign, and I'm not an expert on these areas, but he is vaccinated and his children are vaccinated, and he's not calling to outlaw vaccination or anything like that. So I think that is more of a propaganda line to call him an anti-vaxxer. I mean, I think anti-vaxxer is just a propaganda jingle anyway, basically. It's just kind of absurd.
John Gilmore, you're a major donor to RFK Jr.'s campaign. A lot of people will say, why would you back such a controversial candidate who has no chance of winning?
Well, I think first and foremost, I disagree that he doesn't have a chance of winning. I think he has a very good chance of winning, particularly if Biden drops out, which seems to be more and more likely by the day. But I think his analysis of what's going on in the United States is absolutely correct. And I think the recommendations he's making to address those problems are exactly what we need. I mean, the key issue of his campaign is that we have pervasive corruption in the federal government, working in collusion with very, very large groups of corporations to come up with public policies that favor those corporations at the expense of everybody else. And that is sort of a theme throughout Mr. Kennedy's career. That was the idea behind his highly successful career as an environmental lawyer. He sued this government and large corporations hundreds and hundreds of times successfully. And that was the basic model that he followed, that that corporations were using basically dishonest science. The federal agencies were accepting it, and the result was that the laws of the United States to sort of protect the environment were ignored. He basically applied the same analysis to vaccines and drugs, that we need honest science evaluated by regulatory agencies that don't have conflicts of interest in that evaluation, and that we have to have choice in the population about whether they're going to use various drugs or vaccines or other medical procedures on their own. And so this has been a consistent theme throughout his career. Another thing that he has also been at the forefront of is the fight to stop censorship in the United States. I mean, we recently had a court decision that his organization, Children's Health Defense, helped support, challenging the Biden's administration, regular meetings between federal agencies and social media companies to decide what messages were going to be allowed to be distributed in the United States through social media and which weren't. And the first court shut it down. The Biden administration immediately appealed, and the appeals court basically overturned the lower court, so it's probably headed to the Supreme Court. But this is a profound, profound problem in the United States, particularly for Bobby Kennedy. He's been talking about messages that very powerful operators in the United States don't want being discussed, and he has been the subject of censorship for 20 years, and he's got the evidence in multiple lawsuits to prove that's exactly what happened. And if we don't have freedom of speech, if we don't have the ability to discuss issues amongst ourselves, if we don't have the political culture where different sides of an issue can come together and discuss rationally what's going on and what the options might be, which is sort of another sort of key component of Mr. Kennedy's program, then we're going to be we are in deep trouble, and we're going to get in far deeper trouble if we don't change course and reverse it to sort of the I guess the freer and fairer way things were done in the United States not that long ago. And that's exactly the kind of issues that he's talking about, and I think it's desperately needed in the United States right now.
Sophia, let's just pick up on the point that John made there about censorship. You helped RFK Jr. with his book, and talking to his publisher earlier, Tony Lyons, I understand that book faced an enormous amount of censorship. Why?
I can't climb inside the minds of people and determine the why, but I can tell you that we definitely faced a complete and total media blackout and censorship at every level when it came to releasing that book. And despite that, what I will say, my colleague John just mentioned the carrying the torch that Bobby has, taken over, ironically, from the people who have always carried that torch, who are now doing an about face and saying, I guess some censorship is okay. It is now, Bobby has taken over that fight and just tirelessly fought to break through that barrier. And to date, the book has sold 1.1 million copies. So we were able to overcome a lot of that censorship and a lot of that media blackout. But I will say, just to follow up on what John just said, Bobby's dad and his uncle were implementing policy when they were in office, and trying to implement policy when they were in office to protect us and to prevent us from standing really where we are right now. And it's largely why they were killed. And that makes Bobby Kennedy particularly equipped to pick up that torch as well, and to finally say, no, we do not need to have agencies that are funded by the very industry they are charged with regulating. No, we do not get to have a corporate media in bed with the government.
Well, Dr. Paul Offit says that Big Pharma funding or partially funding the FDA has never affected their judgment.
Well, I don't know how Paul Offit can climb inside their heads either and determine what's affected whose judgment, but I can tell you that a 5-year-old can look at that equation and see how that could possibly go south. And to suggest that we shouldn't identify potential weaknesses and vulnerabilities systemically is negligent.
You mentioned the fact that, well, you say the establishment had a hand in killing both RFK Jr.'s uncle and father. Let me pick that up with Aaron Good. We've even heard RFK Jr. telling Joe Rogan that he has concerns about possibly being assassinated. Can you talk about, first of all, the belief that the CIA had a hand in JFK's assassination, and then answer if you think that RFK Jr.'s life is at risk?
Well, when Richard Schweiker was working with the Heart Committee, the Schweiker Heart Committee in the church during the Church Committee investigating the CIA's and FBI's performance in the Warren Commission investigation on JFK's death, he concluded that the fingerprints of intelligence were all over Lee Harvey Oswald. When Lyndon Johnson was briefed about the CIA plots against Castro, which were done without Kennedy's approval, he concluded that the CIA was probably behind the Kennedy assassination. Robert Kennedy himself, Robert Kennedy Sr., thought the same thing, and he told confidants that he would reinvestigate this as president, and that he concluded the CIA and the mafia and the right-wing Cubans were behind what happened in Dallas. So there's an enormous amount of evidence on this. The last official investigation into the assassination was the House Select Committee on Assassinations. They concluded that Kennedy was killed by a probable conspiracy. And then just a few years ago, the lead counsel for that body, is a guy named Robert Blakey, he signed a statement saying that the intelligence agencies were responsible for the JFK assassination, and called for truth and reconciliation for the 1960s so that we could investigate and illuminate and release the files on assassinations that the national security state was involved in, both of the Kennedy brothers, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. So the U.S. empire has this history of getting rid of people that are inconvenient for it. So if at the worst case scenario is you have to invade a country, but there's been assassinations, overthrows. These are things that RFK Jr. is explicitly saying the U.S. needs to stop doing. And
can anybody on the panel,
U.S. transitions away from empire?
And can anyone on the panel, illuminate me about RFK Jr.'s own concerns about potentially being a target? Has anybody here ever been told about that?
I don't think it serves the establishment I think that the idea behind an assassination is to dismiss and get rid of a problem. And I don't think that bodily harm coming to someone like Robert Kennedy would do that. I think it would illuminate and draw attention to it. And I think that's distinctly the opposite of what proverbial they want.
Okay. John Gilmore, final question. Let's imagine that RFK Jr. actually makes it to the White House. What specific policies would you like to see him enact? What is the most pressing issue, or 2 or 3 issues that he needs to address?
One, I think he needs to stop the perpetual warfare that the United States has been engaged in for 30 years or more. Take your pick where. There's always a war going on somewhere, whether it's Afghanistan or Ukraine or Iraq and so on. I also think he needs to do a thorough house cleaning of the federal agencies, starting with the CDC, the FDA, and pursuing as probably through the FBI and others as well, to stop basically the collusion, to basically make these honest agencies that look out for the public welfare, to make sure that the highest scientific and safety standards are used in medical studies, that the interests of the American public are put first. One example of that is it seems that the federal response to COVID has cost the United States, I think the last estimate I saw, $32 trillion, right? And has caused inflation to go out of control. There's been a massive loss of small businesses. The toll has been tremendous economically and for no particular public health benefit. And I think this is the kind of thing that you would see a Kennedy administration clean up very, very quickly.
Well, thanks for watching our program. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and even subscribe.